Right, so where do you put your effects, sends or on the inserts? Stick around and let's find out. Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another Sonic Academy video with myself, Nate from Protoculture. I see this question asked all the time. Where do you put your effects? Specifically reverbs, do we put them on sends or do we put them on inserts? What's the deal? Now the short answer is, there isn't really a short answer. It really depends on what you're wanting to do. And quite often I'd encourage that you break the rules as well. So I don't want to say there is a specific rule as to where you want to put your reverb, whether it's on a send or an insert. What I will say is that it's important to understand the ramifications of using one method over the other. You need to understand how your signal is flowing through the effects and what is going to be happening to them if you choose to go one route or the other one. So let's dive in and take a look at a couple of examples and see which option you should use for which tasks. Right, so I am in Bitwig over here. I've got a project loaded up. This is actually from a Sonic Academy tutorial series that we have online. It is the Progressive Trance remix that we recently did. I'm just going to be using this as an example just to illustrate a few scenarios as to how you want to set up your effects. Right, so let's take this drum sound for example. Typically I would set up a reverb like this, or drum ambient reverb, as a send effect. Since I'm only wanting to send a small amount of the drums to the reverb to kind of give them a little bit of place them in a room or a space really. But you may be wondering, why do we need to do that when if we load up a reverb, any reverb these days, any modern reverb, there's a mix dial here. So we can also send a portion of the signal here and keep part of it dry, exactly the same way that we would with the send. There's a couple of things to consider when you have things set up as an insert like this. Firstly, even though you're applying a reverb only to a portion of the sound, i.e. you have some dry signal passing through and then you have the reverb passing through, what we're getting out of this is a sum of the reverb being summed back. So you've got the 20% reverb and it's being added to the 80% dry. So whatever you add after that is being added to that entire signal. So if we were to add additional effects here, like say some compression, you would be compressing the tail of the reverb up with the signal that you're compressing, the clap signal we have here. You have to consider the fact that if you're going to add stuff after this, that may be problematic. If you're going to add in a delay alongside this as well, that delay is going to be delaying the reverb. So you're going to have a reverb that's being copied however many delays that you have after that. You add the delay before the reverb, same problem. You're going to be having multiple delays but with reverb being applied to them. So in this kind of case, you may want to consider sending it to a send, because what happens there is you're sending 20% of the dry signal to the send, but you're not adding it back. You've got an entirely separate channel, as I do here. We can take a look at this drum setup here. We'll just remove that reverb and rather than have an insert here, also where we're having to multiply different reverbs on each channel, I want the drums all to have a single space. We've talked about this before, about how to glue things together, and giving the same reverb to everything within this drum mix is going to help glue the whole mix together. And you do that by having a send, and I'm sending little bits of each percussion instrument in this drum mix to this drum verb that we have here. In this case we have a convolution reverb with a very small little room, and we can solo this drum verb now. That's what's being sent to it right now. We could maybe send this one too, a little bit more. So this is a very subtle reverb that we have here, but it's being applied to all of these at the same time, but it has its own separate output. So it's not like anything that's being applied to the drums is being applied to the reverb tail. What then happens in this case is this drum verb gets sent to the group where everything else is going. So anything at this level, where we have some compression and stuff being applied, this is being applied to our drum verb as well. In this case, if we decided that we didn't want to get so much of the ambience being pulled up by the compression on this bus channel that we have here, we may want to route this somewhere else. In Bitwig, this is a simple case of just pulling it out of the group. You could also decide that you want to route this somewhere else. If you go to the output setting over here, we could send that straight to the stereo bus if you wanted to. Right, so another great reason to use reverbs, especially as sends, as well as just, like I said, if you keep them separate, you can control them separately again. Now, when it comes to mixes, for example, let's say, for instance, I wanted to add a bit of reverb onto this mid-bass sound that we have here. Now, of course, a lot of reverbs do have controls like this built in, but sometimes you want to be able to use third-party control or third-party effects on a reverb to control them a little bit. Now, if we were to use an insert effect here and we just put a reverb straight in without adjusting any of these controls, we're putting the full frequency range that we have here into the reverb, and we're kind of adding to that. So any of this low frequency stuff that we have here is going to be present in our reverb as well. And now when it comes down to mixes and stuff, you may want to be a little bit more careful about how you control your reverbs and such. That low frequency content is not necessarily something that you're going to want in your reverb effects sense or your effects channels. So in this case, when you're doing something like this, it may behoove you to actually add an effects channel. And let's go to our effects channel and we'll add in the reverb here. We can now send to our reverb channel there. Right, so let's just make sure that we always have that set to 100% full mix. There we go. So we've got the same thing now, except we've got the reverb on a separate channel. So what this means is that we could go and add in an EQ, for example. And we could apply this separately to the reverb stream now and not apply that, because this is part of a bass. It's a mid bass. We want to keep some of that low mid content in this. But we don't want the reverb mudding that up, but we still want to get the space of the reverb. So what we're doing now is we're actually carving out the frequencies out of the reverb without affecting the original bass sound. And we've also got the ability to do stuff like enhance areas or make the reverb more in certain areas of the frequency spectrum as well. So let's say, for instance, we could bring out the mids of the reverb to get even more sort of stereo width in the mid region there. And remember, we're EQing the reverb stream now, not the bass. So that's another great reason for using the sends. Now, other places that you would typically want to do send effects, something like vocals, for example, you're typically never going to be applying a reverb 100% wet to a vocal. It's also nice to have that on a separate channel, typically because a vocal as well is something you're going to want to compress and control the levels of. Granted, you can add the reverb after the fact that you've done the compression, but I like to, again, use my backing vocals with the same reverb. I'll typically set up a bunch of effects for the entire vocal group. So in this case, what we're actually doing is we're sending this vocal one to this reverb here, and we're actually ducking the reverb underneath. And you can't do that with an insert effect unless you have a plugin which is specifically going to duck it internally. You do get those, but in most cases, if you're using the reverb and you want to duck it underneath, you need to use the drive vocal as the sidechain trigger to tell the reverb when to duck. And that's what we've done here. We've set up the reverb as a send effect, and the drive vocal itself is being left alone, and that's triggering the reverb to duck underneath it. So it's a really key area, again, where you're going to want to use these send effects over an insert effect on vocals, for example. The finished product that we have, this bounce here, this is with all of these separate reverbs and delay sends being applied here with some automation on the sends and the ducking of the vocal verb. Here we go.
Echoes of love, these all I've ever found.
And you can really hear there's separation between the reverb. You can hear the reverb is doing its ducking thing, but it's also not interfering with the delays. The delay feedback is being automated in and out, so certain words have got, like the echo word, there's a delay that's going echoes, 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 echoes. That's all separate, so there's no sort of unified processing happening after that. Again, like I said, if you're wanting to separate those elements, you're going to want to do them as sends in your track. But what about inserts? I've been talking about sends all the time and saying how great it is to use sends. Well, there's a lot of places that you may want to use an insert effect as well. For one, let's take a look at using them as an effect for creating builds in a track, for instance. Let's check out a section over here. Now, I'm actually already doing that here with some effects on our synth parts and actually with the drums as well. We're using the reverb to essentially distance the sound as it builds to kind of create tension. It'll kind of move into the background and eventually become full wet almost. So full wet reverb is not something I would normally do unless it's a sound design aspect of a track. In this case, it works really, really well. We'll take a look at how this is set up. So in this case, what I have here is this FX layer on these synths, and if we open this up, we can expand that. And I've got a delay plus from Bitwig, as well as realm loaded in series. So again, now what's happening is that the delay is actually running through the reverb, and we're kind of getting a lot of extra reverb on the delays. In this case, that's exactly what I want, because I want to kind of have this overload of information kind of building up as the track builds up. So what we've done here in this case, we've actually applied a macro in Bitwig just to the mix of the delay, and I believe also to the mix inside of realm. So when we adjust this FX build command that we have here, you'll see that it's actually adjusting the mix for both the delay and realm at the same time. Now, if we were to do this in a send, you could technically do it, but you're never going to get 100% wet from the send without actually automating the volume down of the track that you're working on. You would have to go full up to the send, so you'd be sending 100% of the signal to the send, and then you would also have to automate 100% of the dry signal down so that you have only the send left. Now, this is a real pain to do. It just did a lot of extra work when you could just put everything on as an insert in this case, and then you end up with this effect, this kind of blurring effect, which works really, really well as a writing tool in your arrangements to kind of create tension, as I said. So we'll take a listen to just the synths here. And we've got this channel, the FX build, just coming up and up and up. And there you go. It's giving you that nice bit of tension for that drop. Right, so there we go. That's just a couple of examples, but really just to kind of show you how to think about things when you are deciding whether you're going to set up a reverb send or a effects send. Like I said, it doesn't have to be reverbs. It could be anything from delays to even compression you can do on a send effect if you want. But the main thing to take away from here is, do you need to have control over the effects separately? Because in that case, you're going to want to be doing the effects send. So typically anything that needs to share an effect, if you need to EQ an effect, you're going to want to put that on a send. And if you're wanting to have a little bit of extra control in a situation where you have a sort of dry signal which is semi-processed by an effect. On the other hand, if you're going to be wanting to process an entire signal at 100% wet, or if in the case that you're going to be applying it with a mix style set down less, that you're not applying 100% effects to it, but you want that to be affected by plugins after that in the chain, then an insert is totally fine. There are some cases where, you may apply reverb as an insert effect and then add some heavy compression after that. It gives you a really unique sound and brings a lot of the ambience up. If you are going for that kind of sound, then by all means do it. There's really no rule that says you shouldn't. The only rule that I think that you should have is that you should understand what you're doing when you do it. And hopefully this video helps you guys just kind of get some clarity as to what's going to happen to your signal when you do one or the other, as far as using sends or insert effects. Right, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I will catch you soon right here at Sonic Academy. Till then, take care. See you then.